Kia ora koutou, everyone. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start and presenting our kaupapa today, remembering the dawn raids 50 years on. In the case of an emergency or earthquake, drop cover and hold. If we need to evacuate the whare, please take direction and lead from our Te Papa Kaimahi and hosts and Te Papa staff that will direct you to the closest exits and way out. This direction here, through Mana Whenua, and straight through to Araahine, down the stairs this way. Our designated emergency gathering point is at the front of Te Papa entrance. Our hosts and Te Papa Kaimahi will direct the way. Please don't rush, be mindful of each other and look after each other and follow the guidance of our staff. The closest whare paku is just to the right down here. It's very close, you just turn to the left. Just let one of our hosts or staff know if you are feeling unwell or lightheaded or need some additional support. Tēnei koutou, ki orana, talofa lava, maloa lelei, nisa bulavanaka, kasia lelei, Māori, and halo olaketa people of Moana Nui Akiwa, our one salt water, our one salt water, our one people. Ko kira tōku ingoa. I am the conceptual creator and project lead of this project, remembering the Dawn Raids 50 years on. Ua tafa mai ata, the darkness is moving away, the light is starting to come in. Gifted by our mural artist, Liana Leiataua's father, Leiataua Lesa Mulafuiana, gifted this fitting title of our transformational works, one full of depth and great meaning. These words carry the message loud and clear that we welcome the light in, we expand our hearts, and we transform our minds towards a better and brighter future. No more will we let the darkness weaken our spirits. We must rise above it and plant the seeds of healing for our future generations. Our mokopuna, tamariki, our tamaiti, our pikinini. Reflecting on a beautiful moment in time yesterday morning, we came together, a collaboration of many hands with Te Papa, Wellington City Council, Manatu Taonga, Wesley Church, our artists Liana Leiataua and Johnny James, along with our prolific national panel guests, to welcome a new dawn and a new day. A year ago, after conversations with Dr. Rachel Yates Pahulu, we knew we wanted to create something special, meaningful, transformational, inspired by a mural, Whakaoka Kia Whakaora, Educate to Liberate mural by Matua Tigilau Ness and his good friend, Honorary Polynesian Panther curator Chris McBride. I knew that we wanted to create a mural that represented community, activism, and art all in one living place. I just didn't know where it would be and how would we do it. Whakaako Kia Whakaora, Educate to Liberate, was created in honour of the 50th anniversary of the Polynesian Panthers in Ponsonby in Auckland, after Matua Tigilau met the Minister of Culture and Heritage, Minister of Culture for the Black Panthers of America, Emory Douglas. At the time was their 50th anniversary in Oakland, California. Depicting the connection of the Black Panthers in the 50th of America and the Polynesian Panther Party of Aotearoa New Zealand. Now we are here in the 50th year since the Dawn Raids, and Ua Tafa Mai Ata has been born, activating our living history through art, social justice, culture, and transformation of community. What a beautiful thing to bear witness to and a very special place to arrive at. After meeting with Liana Leiataua, we envisioned a beautiful mural artwork that would come from the community, from their collective stories and testimonies of the dawn raids. Through a three-part series of talanoa throughout the year, we engaged a diverse range of Pacific voices through a series and a creative workshop through design with youth and their ainga. The series of engagements with community was aimed towards creating transformation and a path towards healing. Our project is the culmination of all facets of the community. From this project, including kaumātua artists, filmmakers, community activists, Pacific organisations, Polynesian Panthers, church leaders, high school students, tamariki, poets, and musicians that have been impacted by the dawn raids in Aotearoa from 1974 up to present day. I would like to introduce now our keynote moderator today for our national panel, The Impact and Legacy of the Dawn Raids. Tongia Lele, Dr. Safua Akile Amama, is the head of New Zealand Histories and Pacific Cultures at the Tapapa Museum. Formerly, she was the director of Centre for Samoan Studies at the National University of Samoa. She works across multiple networks with curators, academics, artists, communities, and agencies, and is interested in expanding curatorial and museological practices. She is an affiliated researcher on the project Indigeneities in the 21st Century, a multi-sited project across North and South America, Australia, and the Pacific. She was elected president of the Pacific History Association in 2021 and is adjunct research fellow at the Museum of Heritage Studies program at Victoria University. She has research interests in cultural heritage, gender, governance, and health. Safua holds the High Chief title of Tongia Lele from the village of Te Avea in Samoa. And I'll let Safua take it away now. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, Lisa Bulavinaka, whakalofalahi atu, malo elele, talofa lava, and welcome to our national panel focused on the impact and legacy of the dawn raids. Thank you for joining us today for this special event. Your presence uplifts this occasion. Thank you also to Pautikanga Tawhiti Kunaiti for opening this sacred space for us all, especially acknowledging our mana whenua, whānau. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe te rangatira. Well, my role today as moderator is to facilitate a lively discussion on this important kaupapa. So just to set the agenda for our panel today, firstly I'll share an overview of today's topic, which Kira has done eloquently already. I'll also introduce our panelists and invite each panel member to also introduce themselves. I'll also next offer some questions to our panel members to share their thoughts and reflections, followed by a Q&A session, which will open to our audience, and then I'll wrap up with a brief summary. So let's get the waka moving. Today, we're here to reflect on the impact of the dawn raids, a painful chapter marked by racial profiling, targeting of Pacifica communities, and unjust immigration policies. We come together to honour the experiences of those affected and to reflect on the resilience and activism that arose in response. This discussion is part of the Watafa Maiata project, marking 50 years since the dawn raids. The title means, as already noted, the darkness has moved away, the light is starting to come in, symbolizing our purpose today to bring light, share stories, and work toward healing. Our goal is to examine the legacy of the dawn raids, especially how activism, storytelling, music, and art help preserve these histories and pass them on to new generations. Our panel today brings together voices from diverse fields, each offering unique perspectives on these themes. So, moving into our next section, I'll introduce each of our panellists with a brief biography. Then they'll have a chance to introduce themselves in their own words. And we're especially honoured that Mātua Tigilau will be sharing a song as part of his introduction. Tigilau Ness, our first panellist, was born in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, to Niuean immigrant parents who arrived in the early 1950s. Tigilau grew up in inner city Auckland, moving from Newton to the predominantly Polynesian suburb of Ponsonby in 1961. His commitment to activism started young, joining the Polynesian Panther movement in 1972, immediately after finishing school, in response to the injustices faced by the Pasifika community during the Dawn Raids. In 2014, Tigilau connected with Emery Douglas and, of course, that inspirational trip to California. The mural Whakaako Kia Whakaora, Educate to Liberate, was launched in 2021 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Polynesian Panthers. This mural powerfully bridges the shared struggles and activism of the Black Panthers in the US and here in Aotearoa. Tigilau, I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself and share a song with us.
My name is Tigilau Ness. Taku maunga ko maunga kieke, taku wai ko wai te mata, ko e niue au. So, as I'll move out of here. Thank you. This song I'm going to start with, I wrote in 1974 as I was inspired by the transition of one of my adopted sons, Whawhika Taito, who was transitioning from social welfare home into adult prison. So 1974 when I composed this song, and it wasn't until 2003, 25 years later, that I managed to record it with my band. Yes, as part of the legacy of the Polynesian Panthers, 50 years of activism here in Aotearoa. So the song is called Though We Are. Thank you, Maestro. Thank you everybody for coming in today, joining us. Well, no, we are a long, long way above our head, while the earth below, where we once tread, the roots are dying from where we live. Our children crying, Rastafari dead, and our children crying, Rastafari dread, 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 dread. You know we dread, 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 steady dread, dread, dread. Otelo, thank you very much.
Tigilau, that's just an amazing way for us to enter the space. Don't know about you, but I'm just feeling like we just hold that for a little bit. Well, next we have Mere Montgomery. Mere spent time teaching English and domestic science in Tonga before co-founding the southernmost chapter of the Polynesian Panthers in Ōtepoti, Dunedin in 1973. With her family based in Auckland, Mere travelled frequently, gaining first-hand insight into issues impacting Pasifika communities across the motu. Mere holds a Bachelor of Arts in Māori and a Master's in Social Work, and has spent over 30 years working as a social worker and advocate. Mere's contributions include fostering over 40 children, in addition to raising her own 3 children. Since 1973, her work has taken her across Dunedin, Porirua, and Auckland, supporting the Pasifika community in both urban and rural areas. She was also honoured in the artwork of Dame Robin White, appearing in Mere and Siuloloval, who's here with us today, and in White's book, Something is Happening Here, published in 2022. Mere, we welcome you to share more about your journey in your own words.
Malo. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou e hui mai I raro I te maru o tēnei whare taonga. He mihi atu ki a koutou mō tō kōrero mai ki a mātou I tēnei rā. Nō reira ko au, ka whakapapa ki te rarawa te ao pauri me ngā pui hoki I tētahi taha o taku pāpa. I tētahi taka ko te tonga. Ka huri au ki te reo o taku pāpa I te taha tonga. Ka taki te o lea nou I he lea taonga ke ai peke whakatapu ki ngā haueiki pe ngā tangata whaiwhekau mo I ngā tangata o the Pasifika I hen. Ki he pule o e te papa, whakamālo atu ki a koe e ai ke mau lava o whakataha hen mo e mea ki e dawn raids. Mālo au pito. Ko whakamālo ki e kau ngāwe, kia kira mo e tangata ko ia, e nau tokoni mai kia mau tolu, ke mau asi mai ahoni. Mālo au pito. So, I'm only a little person, really. I live in the South Island. But I tell you, my connections through the moana to the tangata and to the whanua of my people in the Pacific. My tipuna navigated from Hawaii to Aotearoa, Tonga, to Samoa and Fiji. They connect me to the small island of Namuka and Hihifo and Hāpai. Te Tongatapu, Te Vava'u and the Lao group in Fiji. And also my Hawaiian roots come via my Māori side, and my Māori side comes from Te Tokerau. One of the things that's really important for me and why we need to know who we are in order to do the mahi that we do, so we can do the mahi for dawn raids and similar work. I'm Tongan Māori, raised in a Catholic family of 5 girls and 2 boys. My father came to New Zealand in 1940 and joined the New Zealand Army and fought with the 28th Māori Battalion. After that, he married my mum and remained on in New Zealand. My father worked as a labourer. He worked alongside all the other ones that came from the Pacific. He finished education at Standard 4. The reason I say this is the background to why us little people back in the 70s stood up and did the work that we did. I'm the eldest daughter in a family, and the whahu. We have special responsibilities in our family. Whahu to my mother's extended family, and I have to look after my younger siblings and the younger members of our family. I tell you that because people like me would never have joined Polynesian Panthers. My father died in 1971. And that actually brought up some things for me that are very important in terms of my tahatonga. One of the responsibilities I had was definitely to look after my younger siblings. And the only reason people like me could go to the meetings for the Polynesian Panthers was if I went with my little sister and my cousin, female cousin, and we would go with our friends. But I wouldn't have been allowed there at the meeting because Willa Elalahia is my cousin, he's male, and I'm not allowed to be where my brother is. So, I tell you that because it's important. People like us would never have stood up, except that we were New Zealand born and bred, and we wanted to stand up and do something for the injustices against our people. In 71, when I was at school, I had to stand up for racism and give a talk. There was no reaction. Nobody believed that there was racism in New Zealand. So, through the Polynesian Panthers, we stood up and we do that. And that wee picture up on the wall there is actually of Siu Lolovau, who's my eldest daughter, and the painting is by Robin White. And I think there's been a copy of it somewhere here in this museum. The point I want to make is that although I taught in Vava'u at Kilana College, that actually allowed me a year in Tonga where I learnt about my own people. So when I came back to New Zealand in 1973, I went to Otago University, supposedly to start law. Not that I ever finished law, as you can see, I've got other degrees instead. But I started the Dunedin chapter of the Polynesian Panthers there. Dunedin is doesn't have many Pacific Islands, and the Māoris you probably can't see them because they're blonde and blue-eyed. But they're very important people, so people like me and people like Faye and stuff have actually been and lived and been educated at the university at Otago there. I think the biggest thing for me is that people like me did all our work back in the 70s, but we didn't stop there. We knew with the dawn raids, and Tingi did heaps of mahi there at the front. And when I started the Polynesian Panthers, there was no other female who led a chapter, I don't even think in the world. So I had a role of leading our women and our men in doing the programs of injustice and visiting the prisons and doing other things. But the biggest thing for me since then is that we have actually got to the stage now where we're doing the education programs to educate, to liberate, and of course Malani and Alec and Tingi have done a lot of that work going around visiting the schools in various sections throughout the North and South Island. I've only done a couple in the South Island because I just don't have the time to come up. But one of the big things is going and touring and talking in those schools. They don't know the history. These kids don't know our history. Okay, we're old people, but my mokopunas have had to learn their history because they've got a grandmother that actually does things and they have to know something because people ask them questions. So the big thing for me is that these are the pathways that we have had to lay down, layer on layer, from what was built from our parents, our grandparents before us, and we're laying it down for the future. I don't know what's going to happen to the great-grandchildren, but by God, I hope I leave a legacy of which is going to be strong enough to make our kids stand up and be who they are and know who they are. We should be proud of our identities. People like myself are actually coloured by our values, and my values, Tongan values, are whakaapa-apa to my family is have respect, mutual respect for my elders, for my family, and for a number of other things. I have to do the mamahi mea, my loyalty and passion, and my spirit for enthusiasm. And tomorrow you will see that with the rugby league. Go Tonga! So, tauhi wā. My duty is to nurture and maintain all those relationships. I said my father died in 1971. It was critical that I knew who I was, because my father has a status and a rank in the family, and I needed to know who I could sit next to and where I sit in the rankings of anything that happens in Tongan society. My last thing, and I'm going to say, is one of the important values is lototo, humility and service. And you have to do that with a willing heart, because by God, if I didn't do that, my father would have tweaked my ear, my mother would have gone. It's important for us to take stewardship of our families, look after them and all the church. So, basically my last words are, kia kaha everybody, please look after yourself and look after the generations to come. Malo abito. Malo.
Malo, Meret, some amazing advice there, and we've got more to come, so look forward to your sharing. Next we have Oscar Kightley, a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to television and the theatre. He is an award-winning Samoan-born performer, writer and director whose work has significantly shaped Pacific storytelling in Aotearoa. After growing up in Aotearoa, Oscar pursued a career in journalism, receiving the Qantas Journalism Award, and has won numerous accolades in theatre and screen, including the Bruce Mason Playwriting Award and the Arts Foundation Laureate. Oscar's dedication to Pacific representation spans decades. He co-founded Pacific Underground and Island Players Theatre, helping create spaces for Pacific voices in New Zealand's arts and media. His debut play, Dawn Raids, opening soon at Wellington's Opera House, brings this complex history to the stage in a compelling and multi-dimensional portrayal. Oscar, please take a moment to introduce yourself and share a bit about your journey in telling these stories.
Kia ora koutou katoa, talo whalawa, halo laketa. Such a privilege for me to be sharing the stage with these intellectual and creative heavyweights. That's a picture of me. Sorry, I always wanted to play with these pointers. I guess my connection to this kaupapa is, apart from being Samoan who came here in the early 70s, was also, as I kind of got into my creative heart after my career in journalism, I joined an awesome theatre company called Pacific Underground, and I was privileged to be one of the writers for them. We did a few plays. Fresh Off the Boat was the first one, and then around the end of the 1900s, we had to write another play, and I just realized today I was inspired by a play that I'd seen called Think of a Garden, which is written by the first Samoan screenwriter in Hollywood. He used to write for Hawaii Five-0, but he wrote this beautiful play called Think of a Garden, which was about the Māo independence movement in Samoa, but it was about a family's experience, and I think that stuck with me. And when Nathaniel Lees and Kath Cardiff brought that play to Wellington, I was the lighting operator, so I got to watch it every night. But I just loved that it was about a really big historic event, but it was looking through it through the lens of a family's experience. So when we were looking for a new play, I'd always remembered this term called dawn raids that I'd heard as a kid. I remember hushed conversations about it in the sitting room. You know, when you make the parents the cup of tea and biscuits, then you're kicked out of the lounge, but you hear some of the hushed, stressed out discussion. And so when we were looking for a play, I knew Dawn Raids would be that one. And this is the first poster. That's me on the poster. I know you can't tell. I had blonde hair then because I was living in Wellington, and there was a real thing at the time where lots of Samoan guys were dyeing their hair blonde, and I'm sure that's why I have no hair today. But this was the first poster, and that was from our theatre, our season at the Herald Theatre. That was '97. The next year we got, oh, that's a better picture. By then the blonde had faded. You can't see the blonde hair as much. And that's two incredible members of Pacific Underground, Michelle Mwanga-Patia, next to me, who played Teresa, and Erelia Ifupo, who played the mum. And that poster was actually designed by a young graphic artist in Christchurch, Jacob, who's now one of the leading lights at Weta Workshop. And then we always wanted to bring it to Wellington, but after 2 seasons we weren't able to. And then with the apology in 2021, it brought it all out, and then Auckland Theatre Company and Pacific Underground brought the play back in 2022, and that's the poster there. Talia Ray Mavaenga, Poss and Gunn's daughter, she played Teresa, so Michelle's her auntie, and then she plays the part. Mikey, awesome Tongan actor from Auckland. Loie, you might know him from the ASB ad. He's a brilliant actor, and also the amazing Bella Kalolo. Just last week she was on Shortland Street pashing Chris Warner. So we had a real cast of heavyweights, and that came back in 2022, and we just did a season in Wellington thanks to the fund that accompanied the apology. We were able to get some of that funding and bring the show back to Wellington. It only had 2 nights at the Opera House. Yeah, so it's so nice to be still talking about this. At the time, it felt like no one cared, only our people did, because I wrote it only 23 years after the raids had started. It's incredible now, and I always will recognise the government for doing that apology. I was there. It was a pretty amazing day. I was saying at dinner last night, I wish they'd left the mat on Jacinda just a wee bit longer. Just a few beats, just enough for it to be uncomfortable, and for everybody in the town hall who was a part of it to just feel and accept the apology before they lifted the mat off. But I guess that kicked off all this work that's culminating in today, and also I hope a lot more resources that will help tell this shameful part of our history, which was so stink. And now that we're all still here, it's not like we left. It's not like we went, oh, gosh, they're mean, let's leave. Now we're here, we're part of life, we're politicians, you know, we're cabinet ministers, we're academics, we're not just the sports stars or the artists. You know, we never left. That was so unnecessary, just to make us feel that stink for all those years. And the legacy was huge. It had a lasting impact. For one, our relationship with police was forever sullied. But I guess we'll get into more of that stuff later. So thank you so much for being interested enough to be in this space with us today. Kia ora.
Mahalo whawhtai, Oscar. Great to see how your play has resonated all this time and continues to live on. Next we have Nina Nawalowalo Nina is an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to theatre and Pacific culture, artistic director and co-founder of the Conch Theatre and Film Company, renowned for her visually stunning, socially impactful storytelling. Nina has presented her work globally, from the Sydney Opera House to London's Barbican Centre, blending magic and depth in productions like Vula, Masi, Marama, and A Boy Called Piano. Her commitment to social change led her to establish the Solomon Islands National Women's Theatre Company, using theatre to address violence against women. Her latest film, supported by the New Dawn Raids Fund, focuses on the Dawn Raids in Wellington, exploring the city's struggle for justice and the pioneering efforts of her father, Ratu Noa Nawalowalo, the first Fijian barrister in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Nina is joined by Mai Kali Kilioni, and I hand over to Nina for her introduction.
Vinaka Valeu, Nisambula Vinaka. And Wuku Nina Nawalowalo, Kinano Matavu Valley, O Vinakata Mo Kindava Kimuni, and Mataka Vinaka Sinukua, Vinaka Valeu, Vosanuvi Kitavaki, and Matua Kimdono Valley Silesia Te Papa. Vekemuni na lue viti raramba ni varonti mo ene vetanongo. Ngone talno membaleti ndona no da leo ni bono me viti kama vakatevte ko valeu ene kana karavi na valatak no ndudun na leo ni bono me Pasifika. Membaleta na veka ene visauni lao kabatori na tinka dio vitsaul kava kababu kina na nondra waka ulistal wako kua kina vienan au irna non damata vale mena Pasifika ngoni talno membaleti ratuno no walwal ngeba madala kina onina no di talno tala kendal linbono mai viti membaleta nei tavi mai vata te ko kino kwa me buke kenda na le Pasifika ena bunongo Aotearoa asa na sulino no binina ngeva madalata kina na buni I tuktuku embaleti no na ratu naka.
Nisambula Vinaka. I'm honoured to be invited today and to be included amongst the distinguished panel guests. My name is Nina Nawalowalo and I'm the Artistic Director of the Conch, Wellington-based theatre and film company, dedicated to using the arts as a vehicle for social change. We are currently making a documentary highlighting the Wellington-specific experience of the Dawn Raids, in particular the contribution of Pacifica leaders, the Wellington Pacific Advisory Committee, lawyers and councillors who advocated for the Pacific community and represented in courts the families and individuals affected. The raids themselves were the sharp end of these times, and community mobilisation through direct action a vital part of their opposition. However, the raids themselves were a consequence of policy and law. And there was a struggle taken to the streets. There was a parallel battle that was fought in the courts and at the level challenging the government, which was equally vital but less known and documented. This subject has been very close to my family's heart for a very long time, and I'm here alongside my elder brother, Ratu Robert Nawalowalo, and my younger sister, Bulo Bridget Nawalowalo, to represent our father, the late Ratu Noa Mbalavu Nawalowalo, from the village Tavuki Kandavu, who was the first Fijian solicitor and barrister to graduate from Victoria University in 1963, and the first Pacific lawyer to practice law in Wellington. He set up his private practice in 1976 and was a part of the group of Pacific leaders who set up the first Wellington Pacific Advisory Group. Together they established an important infrastructure to support the Pacific community during the Dawn Raid era, which included the Pacific Resource Centre on Willis Street, the Newtown Community Centre, where my father's collaborators set up the Citizens Advice Bureau to provide free legal service. As chairman of the Justice Committee of the Pacific Advisory Council, he was tireless in challenging the injustice of the immigration policy of the times and its targeting of Pacific people at a government level. Speaking at public meetings, writing articles in the newspaper, meeting government ministers, writing to the Prime Minister, and establishing a lobby group, Amnesty Aroha, which fought to protect people from the humiliation, persecution, and deportation. As a barrister in the courts, he fought a series of important cases over a 10-year period, from the District Court to the Court of Appeal to the High Court. With fellow barristers George Rosenberg and George Barton, he assisted in preparing the case of Whalemai Lesar, which led to the July 19th the Privy Council ruling in London that Samoan people who were born during New Zealand colonial rule of Western Samoa should be granted citizenship. This ruling led to a government select committee in Parliament, at which my father, at their request, represented the Samoan community of Wellington. Within these days, there were 72 deportation cases dropped in the Wellington District Court. The government introduced a new policy which reversed this ruling, and this case is still unresolved in a new bill which shortly will be tabled in Parliament. I just thought to read just a slight short quote. I mean, it's so moving to be here today, and it's about, the legacy and the contribution of Wellington leaders, the late Lani Tupu, Tyler Cleverley, who is not here today, Mr. Ria, and many other Pacific key people. And I just wanted to read one quote from a newspaper article from my father. Many features of the immigration laws of New Zealand are simply barbaric. They are the special and private reserve of those who want the status quo perpetuated despite the changes, the pressures and the sheer need within New Zealand and around the world. They don't want to talk about them. They use them as the shield and the sword against defenceless people. The response of Pacific Islanders to the police action has been angry. I spoke at a meeting attended by Pacific Islanders in Porirua last week. Now, Pacific Islanders don't normally stand up to speak, but at this meeting, despite there was some inadequate knowledge of English, they stood up and showed their anger. Some people are trying to diffuse the righteous indignation of the Pacific Islanders, but you cannot tell Pacific Islanders not to be angry. I think if it's righteous indignation, it must take its course. Pacific Islanders are like anyone else, can't help but react, especially if the injustice is directed against their own people. If we believe that all people are the same, why shouldn't that apply to Pacific Islanders? The relationship between New Zealand and Pacific peoples is not strictly one of apartheid. The way the economic system operates the capitalistic system, it has the same effect. The government does not come forward and control the system, but if we condone its effects limiting the rights of Pacific Islanders, then we are just as guilty as white South Africans. Mr. Muldoon says capitalism is a wonderful system, but in this instance, we find that it cannot meet human needs. I'm concerned to see that the momentum of the campaign and the defence of the rights of Pacific Islanders is maintained. We need to take action to strike while the iron is hot. We cannot leave it for a few weeks to the changes that may soon be over. Minaka Wakalevu, and the documentary is sort of leading us to just honour the contribution of all of the different Wellington leaders, and so it's a deep honour to be here today. Ina ka whakalevu.
Ina ka whakalevu, Nina and Maikali. Look forward to that documentary when it's launched. Our final panellist, Liana Leiataua, is the lead artist for the Uatafa Maiata project, a Samoan Scottish artist born in Aotearoa. Liana describes her art as siapo Aotearoa, a fusion of traditional Samoan siapo with contemporary influences. She learned siapo making from Mary Pritchard and the siapo artisans of Leone Tutuila, grounding her work in Samoan tradition while integrating modern Aotearoa elements. Liana's art has a deep community focus, with a notable recent work being the public mural at Wesley Methodist Church in Wellington, where she brings Pacifica and community stories to life. Liana is also an educator and active member of the Samoan community in Porirua, dedicated to nurturing cultural connections and storytelling. Liana, please share with us a bit about your journey and what drives you as an artist.
This is the uniform of the ma. This is the uniform that was worn by my ancestors, Te Pō Tamasese, who was shot by the New Zealand government on the lands of Samoa. This is my inspiration for my work. This is also the uniform that my grandfather, Tigilau Ness, the 15th signatory of the Constitution of Samoa. This is also the inspiration of my work. My children, who are born here, are also the inspiration of my work. I didn't take this commission on lightly at all. I thought about when I got the call from Kira to say we're doing a mural for the Dawn Raid. We can just talk about that really, really lightly. It goes really, really fast, but that's part of my childhood. The youngest artist of this mural was 4 years old. She just started school. Momo is her name. She carries the name of her grandmother. The woman that came pregnant to New Zealand at the time of the Dawn Raids came and was taken back. Families were separated. We were ridiculed. People were humiliated, and my very own family home was invaded by police. We were followed up a Champion Street, just coming from McDonald's, which was the great thing that came into Porirua at that time. And so that was a great thing. But that night, when we were just having our family time and going home, we were stopped by the police. My father was asked to see for his passport. At that time, he had just become a New Zealand citizen. But before that, the Samoans were British citizens. So there was no reason or any labelling in terms of overstayer. We were never overstayers. We were moana, we were people of the moana. Our relationship here to this land is tuakana teina. We come from the Pacific. We are the Pacific. So in terms of being chosen to do this work is a great honour. But it's also a great burden as well. And I cry and I hear the wind outside, because that's our ancestors calling us and supporting us at this kaupapa, because this kaupapa is part of my childhood, but it's before that. It's my ancestors. And my auntie here, Paula Masoi, she carries that with her. And so all of that, our families, we're ordinary families. And so there, it was, as my brother Oscar said, it should never have happened. But it did. It really, really did. So when I was thinking about this work, I wanted to create something that would hold the mamae. And when I found out where that location was, which was Wesley Church, and Wesley Church was where Auntie Tala had the meetings to support our families. But Auntie Tala also with Elaine Annandale and all the other women, the ordinary women would open up on Willow Street at the resource centre. That would be a haven for all the people that were regarded now as overstayers. And so there was a whole network that started to happen. At that time, my father was the first Samoan businessman. He had a 4 square on Astrolabe Street. So that then became a hub for our people to get information and to basically support. Notes would come down. For the children were activated at that time, because most of them were the ones that spoke English. So I'm talking about the ones that were my teenage cousins, which had to step up at that time and become interpreters and deal with police and go to housing and all these things that started to really rustle our community. But our community, because our community is based on love, rose up together and supported each other and just prayed, and we activated in a peaceful way, because that is our way of being through Tamasese. Is through peace, is through love, is through finding that resolution. So this work that is now alive at Wesley is a healing wall, and it's a healing wall that has very strong images. It has the images of the ifunga with the New Zealand flag under it. And so it may be offensive to some people in this community, but that's our reality. That's our place of pain. And so it had to be there. It had to be in the corner of that building. And so on that, and also what makes up that mural as well is the artwork of the children. And it was how the children had created their work. So if you see, and so on top is Momo's plane, how Momo had drawn it, and how Sonia had drawn her beautiful, just the art pieces that are on that wall are directly the interpretation of what came through it was one of the workshops that we had. So for this project, it's very personal, but it's also a great honour and it's a great responsibility to be able to stand here in this pulatasi and to be able to articulate through my work the mamae, but also the mana of our people. Around the bottom of it is the moana that all of us all of us here belong to. So in terms of overstayer, it's only tōkana teina who comes before and who comes after. And so I just really want to leave it there. Malo.
Hello. Thank you, Liana, for that very powerful and moving experience. To you all, thank you for such moving introductions. They provide insights into your lived experiences, your shared histories, and collective resilience. So I just want to acknowledge that at this moment during our session. We're now going to explore some of the themes that have been raised already, and I'll ask each of the panel members a question based on your experiences and insights. Tigilau, could you share your reflections on activism in Tamaki Makaurau, particularly the role of the Polynesian Panthers in mobilising against the injustices of the Dawn Raids?
Yes, okay. When the Dawn Raids began in 1974, we as Polynesian Panther Party already existed. So we were motivated to do actions against this racist government's, at that time, actions upon Pacific Island people. It wasn't only towards Pacific Island people, it was to anybody that was brown at the time. And this is in Auckland. And Auckland at the time was the where most Pacific Islanders lived in. It was the gateway to New Zealand. And the Polynesian Panthers, when we first heard about the Dawn Raids that was happening, one of the activists' actions that we took was to Dawn Raid politicians' houses. In the Polynesian Panthers, there's a group called the Military Wing, and those are members who were prepared to get arrested, confront the police, confront the system, who were prepared to get into trouble. And you got to remember, at that time, we were only like 16, 17 years old. And it wasn't acceptable to our parents anyway for us to go against the system or the authority. The police and the government, they were meant to be right and looking after us. But here they were, dawn raiding our people. So it wasn't only Tongans and Samoans and other immigrants who were being raided or randomly checked. If you were brown, you're more than likely to be stopped on the street and demanded to produce identity or a passport. In fact, the police commissioner at the time said, stop anybody who didn't look like a New Zealander. So if you were brown and you wore talofa shirts and wore jandals and jeans, you're not a New Zealander. And if you spoke in an accent, you definitely got to be checked up. So it was that kind of time, mid-70s. And in the Polynesian Panthers, of course, the military wing, we decided that we'd do that, dawn raid a politician's house. So I went out with the group one night. At that time, of course, us being young Pacific Islanders, we didn't have cars. We didn't have driver's license. But our Palangi friends did, our Pākehā friends did. And they belonged to CARE, Citizens Against Racial Discrimination, Accord, Auckland Citizens on Racial Discrimination. There was a lot of Palangi groups who had the cars. And we called upon them to drive us out to the various places where politicians lived. And in that time, you were able to find out where politicians lived. It was in the yellow pages. So it was easy enough. And me and the group that I was with, we ended up out in Howick. We were given a specific house, number and street. Not everybody knew, in the military wing, not everybody knew where the different groups were going, because if you get caught and arrested at 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't do that back then, still don't do it today. But 3 o'clock in the morning, we ended up out at Howick. At that time, Howick was a predominantly European, Palangi area, very affluent, and we knew and found out that that's where a politician, and I always apologise, when we go out to schools and tell the children our story, I always apologise first to any member of the Birch family. Because Bill Birch was the house that we dawn raided. And I apologise because we know what dawn raids is like. And for us to do that, as children who were in his family at the time, I really do sincerely apologise if there's any Birch family here today. What we did, we would rock up to the house, and Bill Birch's house, of course. We shone spotlights on the windows, and we used loudhailers. Bill Birch, come out with your passports. We waited for a few minutes, and this is 3 o'clock in the morning, so did it again. Bill Birch, come out with your passports now. And the lights come on, and we knew, life in there, and the front door opened, and we'd jump in our cars, pile in our cars, and took off. And we continued to do that the following weekends. And eventually, we knew that we wouldn't be able to continue that because the police and probably the Secret Service and all the rest of them would find out. Politicians were complaining about it. How dare they do that to us at that time in the morning? And we said, how dare you do that to us? So that was just one of the activism that we did. The other things that we did also was to leaflet and join with other groups. Because at the time, of course, you don't have modern technology, you can, So we had Gestetner machines, if anybody here knows about printing and stuff.
Methylated spirits.
Methylated spirits and paper. So we distributed with the Citizens Association for Racial Equality, that's CARE, Polynesian Panther Party, that's us, and the People's Union for Survival and Freedom. These are groups that were in Ponsonby, local, Grey Lynn, Kingsland, Parnell, where our people were being targeted. The numbers of Pacific Island families that were dawn raided are incredible. In 1987, they did a digital a search on how many and who. Out of 800 homes, in each home you got to remember that there's quite a number of people. There's mum, dad, and cousins, and children, and uncles and aunties. A lot of people in a home. So 800 homes within 1974 to 1976, and in 1 year, 800 homes, only 12 people were found to be overstayers. So the number and the amount of trauma that went on in that neighbourhood, no wonder it still exists today. And here in Wellington, nobody really knew or acknowledged what was happening at the time. So for it to carry on 50 years later, and you remember, like as how you're hearing, we'll never forget. The trauma is deep. And we found out as the Polynesian Panthers today that a lot of people are reluctant to come forward and tell their stories. But this activity here and the mural is part of that healing, because with the telling comes the healing. So the activism that we did as 16, 17-year-olds, we encourage the young ones today, not to dawn raid politicians' houses, but modern technology. So that's part of the activism that we were involved in the Polynesian Panthers. Thank you.
Thanks, Tigilau. Remember those yellow pages, but just hearing what's happening in Auckland, Mere be great to hear what the activism context is in Dunedin during the Dawn Raids era. What unique challenges did the Polynesian Panthers face in that region?
I think the reality is that it's fairly obvious from people that have hair out here and a dark skin, you're going to stick out in the South Island at the best of times. So the reality of what happened there in the South Island, although I knew what was happening back in Auckland because I was a student, they used to go backwards and forwards, and I used to hear what was happening to my family up in Auckland and stuff. When we were in Dunedin, what we had was we already had committees, Pacific Island committees that were already working with the police, the hospitals and the welfare system. So those things were already in place. But if there was anybody that was outside the realm of those agencies, you didn't talk about them. They were invisible. If they were there, they were there. If they went to church, they went to church. We did not talk about them. We allowed them to live in our communities. So in terms of being proactive about looking after our people, we did the looking after our own people in our way, because it was obvious if you came into our area, you were going to be a marked person. So if anybody came in, we would actually shepherd them out to Central, to Invercargill, and that was the best we could do. So we didn't have that. That's not to say we didn't have racism in Dunedin, because as a Polynesian Panther, and if we talk about the things that we were afraid of, was some of the social security. Social security? No. What are those SIS people?
Yep, SIS.
For people like myself who stood out and was standing up, saying that, you can't do this and can't do that, or hang on, have you a right to do what you are doing to my people? I was actually still actively doing that stuff when they were arresting people, and I would go down into the remand cells and have a look. So that if any of the Pacific Island ones came through, I would have an idea of who they were because people told me. And in those days, we didn't have these things like cell phones and email and whatever. Somehow or other, they knew where I lived. Maybe it was the afro, you see it walking down that part of town, so you just ask somebody, where that lady lives, and you would go down. So, in my experience, we actually sheltered those people and we looked after them in that way.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oscar, your Dawn Raids offers nuanced perspectives on this history. And you've shared a little bit, but can you take us through your creative process and how you approached balancing the different narratives in the play?
So after school, I was a journalist, so I got good at researching stuff. So I knew when I wrote the play that I'd need to do a lot of research, and I was so glad that I spent a year actually talking to people who had lived through it, who were part of the community response, and I'm so grateful that I did. In addition to the important work done by the Panthers, the church also played a big part. Places like Reverend Sio, an icon of PIC Newton, he was always called up to K Road with Reverend Pua to try and mediate when there was trouble in town. Also, social workers like this formidable woman whose name Agnes Tui Samoa. And there was all these different sectors of the community who were responding to that. So I just spent a year just learning what happened, just hours in the Auckland Star Library, reading the old articles, and I was really disgusted by what I found. There was I don't know if it was Immigration Minister Frank Gill or maybe another one, McCready, but he was asked once, why Pacific people were getting targeted. And his comment, he made a comment and he explained, well, it's like, when you look at a group of cows, the Frisian ones stand out. That was his answer. And it was, it was really awful. I was actually, as a young artist and playwright, I just couldn't believe the stuff that our people who just wanted work, who just wanted a different life, they just came here, they were grateful to Aotearoa for the opportunities that could be offered here. We didn't come here for a better life. I hate it when people say that. We came here for a different life, a life that offered opportunities that maybe weren't in our island nations. So that was the process. And then I was actually working in Wellington at the time at Gibson Group on this dodgy comedy show called Skits with Grant Masoy, actually. He was one of the writers on it as well. And no one had computers back then, so I would work writing dodgy skits and then stay at night and write the play. And it took about a week, but I just needed all that stuff just to come out. You know, when you're writing, you just research, you put it all inside your body and your brain and your heart, and then when you're writing, you're the vessel really. It's not about you, and then it just comes out. So that was my process. And I'm so glad I did all that research, because a lot of those people have passed on now. They weren't around for the apology. So that was my process in writing that play. So, and every story in it is true. There's one scene where one of the young characters talks about his auntie's boarding house, where a young, I think he was Fijian actually, he died in winter because they were sleeping on the floor on newspaper. And this was our own people doing this. There were people housing young Pacific people and then taking their pay, knowing that and holding on to their passports even. So that was also a shock to me. There were older Pacific people who were dobbing in their younger relatives for stupid things like spending all their board at the pub instead of bringing it home to send back to the village. It really split the community. You know, there were those, like Tigilau said, you know, most were here legally. And then another bit of research, late in the 80s, they discovered that out of all the overstayers around that time, Pacific people made up only a third. The majority were from South Africa, the UK, and the US. But they don't stand out like Frisian cows. Yeah, and so I knew in this play, I didn't want to write it about what happened on the 9th floor of the Beehive. I wanted to write it from a perspective of a family's experience who went through it.
Malo Oscar. Nina, you've explained your film project that's very personal as well for you. Just wonder if you can tell us a bit more about what you've uncovered in the process and the significance of that work for today.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I suppose one of the things is that we have our father's files, and we have, well, you know, one of the things I suppose when we talk about grief is that in 1984, my father had a house, an office in Bowen House, which is just near the cenotaph there, and he had a massive stroke on a Wellington bus, and coming on the bus, and he was thrown off the bus at Courtney Place, where the bus driver thought he was drunk, and suffered, and that was, you know, the end of his career. And so, you know, it's very mixed for us as a family, because we you know, one has to unpack all of the facts. I suppose the responsibility of the advisory group and our father was that you want to, I suppose I want to try and honour and get, you know, critical facts, and so it's, you know, it's a real privilege. We have our father's register, which is to do with all of the Pacific clients that he represented. And I think, you know, like at that time, it wasn't so much, okay, the Fijians are here, the Tongans are here, the Samoans, all Pacific people worked together because of those realities and the circle of what made up, you know, the advisory group. And so I suppose one looks for clues, and so we have been engaging with the archives. Of course, Tony Haas, who contributed a lot, there's many of his files there. There's many, many articles, and I suppose you sort of think, where do Pacific Islanders get the media and get the light? And it wasn't always in the Dominion Post. It wasn't, you know, so the Socialist Action, as we know, that paper and the different papers that gave the downtown paper, these are the places that a lot of, you know, they were able to discuss things and all of that. So I suppose, I mean, I'm not going to read different things, but I suppose that's what we've been doing, is going into the archives and getting clues. And then I think we have some fantastic, you know, some critical things to do with, you know, the immigration, with the whole thing of amnesty Aroha, which was in 1976, and the beginnings of how they reached to the community with the Samoan and the Tongan and the Fijian and Newtown Community Centre, and where the meetings were. And then we have a memorandum of the Amnesty Aroha. So I suppose through personal things, and then I've known Tala, we've known Tala since I was sort of 13, and when they used to have the meetings at the resource centre, and so, you know, I sort of thought, well, what's the right way, you know, with Tala still being a living, amazing woman who is linked to many people that have passed away. So I asked her son, Fa'avale, to come from Auckland and to interview her. And then there's, of course, my brother and Les Solomona, the Solomonas, who was a pastor, and this is in the Newtown families. And I thought, where do we look for facts, and where do we look? And of course, we know with trauma, people don't necessarily want to come forward. People feel many, many things, but I suppose, and so I'm working with key people who are able to then go to elderly people, and there's some, you know, very positive permanent residency stories and people that may want to open. And so, you know, it's a very deep process, and but I think having our father's register and having the deportation things and the immigration things, and there are, you know, the children of these people, like different people that, you know, may want to contribute in different ways. So it's a very dense process, and, you know, as we know with hidden stories, it takes a community to even think, how do you approach somebody in that sense. So we are working also, you know, with Victoria Law Faculty, and to do with different things within where you can find historic information. And I suppose one just wants to piece together things in a way that are based on facts. So, you know, there's so that's sort of how we're working through different communities, because we know many people don't actually want to talk about it or come forward. And so how to kind of tell a story in a way, and I think reenacting little moments is good as well when you have a documentary, and how to take the audience back to the 70s and that time, and thinking about, you know, black and white and the television, and how do we draw on things that bring memory in that way. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Nina. It's amazing conceptual work, but obviously with a lot of input with families, and amazing around finding the facts, but the facts that were promoted were not factual in that time in the 70s. So finding those resources and sources are really, really going to be an amazing opportunity for all of us Yeah. Liana, the mural project, and I thank you for sharing your powerful story there. Just wondering about the wider community influence in the creation of the mural which you talked about, but also what the key learnings are that you've taken from those engagements.
I think the key learnings is that there needs to be an opportunity to speak, to have a conversation, and to be able to have a safe space to be able to express whatever you need to express in that time, in that space. Working on the mural, there's like the in that specific location is the Wellington City Mission. So there's a lot of Polynesian men came down to the wall and actually tautokō'd at that time, and basically gave because I was by myself in that war, and we'd already created a space with karakia, and stayed in my practice is, especially when I'm doing this type of work and with a particular content, I keep in karakia, and so with that I go to my father and Auntie Paula especially for guidance and also protection, and knowing that there's going to be our children's work on the wall as well. So, and knowing that this is also the whalesa as well. So, yeah, it's I suppose it's sort of taking up our Polynesian practices of doing work, and approaching it in that way, not as a public piece of art on the wall. There's a lot of content and there's a lot of layers that you have to consider. So so to begin with, it definitely has to be given to the atua and getting protection through there, and allowing those being respectful for what comes through as well, in terms of people's stories and their images as well. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, those were very sort of questions tailored to you all. We've got some more sort of general reflections, and I'd like to ask firstly around the government apology. In 2021, the New Zealand government apologised for the dawn raids. It's been 3 years since the apology. What are your reflections on the apology, and what more needs to happen to support healing within our communities? So this is a more to anyone on the panel.
Oh, yeah.
Tigilau?
The apology came about as part of the Polynesian Panthers' 50th anniversary in 2021. We thought it'd be amazing if the government would apologise for the dawn raids of the 1970s as part of our wish list on our 50th anniversary. So a Panther member in Invercargill went to her local MP and suggested that to him. An apology from the government would be very appropriate. After all these years, 50 years of it. So they took it to Parliament, and it was pulled out of a hat, and they decided, yep, we'll go ahead with it. At that time also, there was more Pacific Island MPs in Parliament than ever before. So Honourable William Aotearoa took it, ran with it, and the apology came out of that. The woman that started it all from Invercargill was Pauline Smith, who wrote the book Dawn Raids, which the young girl here is reading at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's where that came from. And part of the apology from the government that we wanted was a wish list, of course, which we know what the government's like. We wanted 100 scholarships teaching our history, teaching Pacific activism. We knew that we wouldn't get 100, we got 10. So that's how the apology for us, came about.
Yeah, thanks, Tigilau. I will just move to our audience, and I'm sure you want to take some questions. So we do have a roaming mic. If anyone would like to volunteer a question?
Just while we wait for questions, just about the apology, I wish the staff at Immigration Department had taken a note of the apology and enacted a policy of, oh, hey, the government's apologised, maybe we should stop them. But they still happened after that. Even after the Privy Council ruling in '82, they were still going on. So, yeah, and the impact of the raids was so insidious, it affected how whole generations of New Zealanders looked at us as people. We were overstayers, you know, we were outsiders, and so I actually wish the apology had come with more. I wish that it had come with pathways to citizenship for existing overstayers, things like that. But the apology was great, but the effects of that, you know, if we're talking about legacy, people today still have that attitude about us. So I was grateful for it, and big ups to the Panthers and Pauline Smith for starting that. But, you know, if you're really sorry, you know, you do as much to make up for the awful stuff that happened. But I was grateful for the apology. I was at the town hall. It was very moving and emotional. But yeah, it affected how, you know, I remember that time, you know, your safe place was your house or your cousin's house or church. It felt yuck even going into the street, even going into shops. So that it left a lasting impact, and I'm sure there's still people today that have these attitudes about Pacific people and wonder why we're even here in the country, who are ignorant of New Zealand's ambitions as a colonial power in the 19th century.
Thanks, Oscar.
Any questions?
Is a question here?
I don't have a question from our Lord. Oh, sorry. Oh, from our Lord to everyone who has done this time. We talk of Talo Family. I didn't recognize you. I recognized the picture, but I didn't recognize the woman sitting there. Talo Fatuno Walwalo's daughter. I knew your father. I knew your father. We've got to, Pacific means peace. We've got to reflect. This is time reflection, for reflection. I think when we've got to remember all of us at that time. We arrived here. We were well brought up by our families, however way that was, with Christian values, etc. I think I was a bit different in that I remember I come from a very staunch Catholic family, and I remember my father questioning the priest for something that they have done. You know, Oscar, I really recognize what you're saying about you hear the elders whispering. For many of us, we protect our family from the woke language because we didn't want them. And I feel for you, daughter of Noah, because I knew your father, and I didn't know that he had an attack. I knew that he died, but I didn't know that he was headed in a bus and died in such a way. And knowing the time, I can just imagine because of his persona. He was a quiet man. We women, we were the ones who talk our men over when we don't think they were too. And I feel, and I want to say to you, yeah, I want to ask the Spirit to do my part. Because I didn't know that. But having said that, Oscar, you hear your family. My lot, when I came in, you were talking about dawn raiding the minister's house. And I remember thinking, my children never knew about that part of me. So when you said the family whispered, I kept all the sad stories, but they may have heard me outside the door with their father when I think, yeah. I remember going to the minister and everyone, Amanda, and they were going to go and dawn raid the Minister of Immigration in Wellington. The only thing that stopped me, I'd go so far, and who's going to look after my kids if I was going to be arrested? That was the only thing. So yeah, Mele came as a young, vibrant, and we were very straight, very conservative, Pacific. When you're naughty, but when somebody has made your name not good in the public, everyone went quiet. That was the theme. That's how we were in those days. Only those of us who can understand, who can speak English. And like I said, I came from Samoa with a bit of chip. I didn't know at the time I had a chip on my shoulder because I heard my family, people reading about the copra and cocoa coming to New Zealand. Hardly any money came back to Samoa. My family's business, Nelson was the richest in Samoa in that time. He was exiled 10 years to make sure that they break not only my family, the business, but because his father was Swedish, he had the understanding of, through his father, that to take our issue to Geneva. That's why Samoa, part of the reason why Samoa became independent. So I really feel for Nawalowalo. He was one, but he was a lawyer. And like Liana, he felt the pressure from us because we didn't understand. My English was better because I was taught by Australian nuns and some French nuns in Samoa. And I had a kind of character that no one will shut me up if I think I'm right. So it was really good. When Mele came down, we used to call them the rotten eggs from Auckland. They'd come down here and they would stir things up. Patiumanga was one of the young students that I see him out there. So there were a lot, because you guys, and I'm really pleased for you, Niue, and what's your name, Tigilau? Because not many of the people from the Rock stand up. But because you call yourself the Polynesian Panther, we didn't work because, what, the blooming blacks from America, our kids are trying to copy them. So so remember the way we were very conservative. And even our own people did not support when we went there, but if you understand the values then. Tala, and I'm glad you mentioned Auntie Tala. Tala, the way she was the first city councillor in the whole country that is a Pacific and a Samoan. And I'm glad because everything started from Wellington. Yes, you might do it all around the country, but we knew we were closer to the machine of government. My children want me to go to Auckland because it's warmer. I said, hell no. I'll stay here. I'm closer to the parliament. The only thing that stopped me from being very quiet, because when we started Tayamanino, the biggest social service in Wellington, in Toroa, my daughter was, and the only thing that stopped me, because her career would have been jeopardized by having a mother like me. But now that she's where she is, I think she's okay. I can come up again and I can be in front again. But the pain, we don't think of our pain. Don't get caught up with that. It's an experience. We Pacific, we're one. I've watched the different administration divide and rule us and turn the little islands against Samoans. And then the Tongans came along and then they turned Tongans against us. The Dawn Raid, I don't want to talk about it. It's not about me, you guys. Before, in my time, there was a generation that talk about, before Christianity came, which is the reason why I said I come from a staunch Catholic family, there was always a belief in Samoa that we're two sides. That this side and the one that you don't see but's with you. But that got demonized. And why I'm saying that, because we're standing on the shoulders of those that are there. And that's our strength in Mananuiakiwa. And I think we need to get over ourselves and come together. Come together in peace and for the ongoing work. Okay.
Hello. Yeah. Mahalo. Mahalo. Sorry, Paula. Thank you for sharing. We might take one more before we wrap up.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko tana ki taku ingo, taku iwi. My question is related to the apology, the content of the apology. I've wondered for a start, my first question, who drafted the apology? Was it done? Was it a group and collaborative exercise, or did you leave it to the lawyers? The second question is, perhaps I struggle because I don't want to be rude, but I worry that that apology hasn't taken its place as it should. Every school child should know about the apology. Every school child should know why there is an apology. Please accept my humble entreaty to publicise or at least encourage the government to publish. You will correct me, no doubt.
Thank you.
Yes.
You answer the first one, I'll answer the bit about the kids and education, the curriculum.
The apology was drawn up by the Pacific members of the cabinet at the time. Alputa William Seal, Cipollone, Carmel Cipollone, and the other Pacific Island members of Parliament. So they drew up the apology after it was okayed in Parliament that it should be discussed. And some of our young influencers pushed that all the members of Parliament should be aware of the apology. So they had to put it in the minutes of the government meeting, Hansard I think it is called. That means that any member of the other parties, they have to discuss it. They can't sideline it and say that's only one party, Labour Party's policy. Everybody had to discuss it because it was part of the parliamentary minutes. That's how they work. The other thing about that's who drew it up. The other thing about that it should be taught in schools, it is now possible to do that. The Polynesian Panther Party is accepted in the school curriculum as of 2022. It's mandatory for the education system to teach our true history. So we have been around to several thousands of school children and teachers as well for the last 11 years, telling our story about our activism and including now the apology. Pauline Smith, who wrote the book, we take that as part of our resource to the schools that we go to. I counted the other day over 47 schools, secondary, intermediate, primary schools that we've been to, not counting the schools outside of Auckland. And here today we have a young girl with the book about the Polynesian, about the dawn raids. She's learning about the apology. So the book itself, the children that we give it to in the schools, they go home and they talk to their parents about it. So, you know, the young ones, they're finding out about it, they're learning about it, and they're talking. As you know, a lot of our people don't talk about it because that's how traumatic it is. And we know when you're convicted of something, very hard to go forward. So this process with the mural, educate to liberate, whakaako kia whakaora, is part of it. Is part of people being able to go there and see the story and wonder and question. Art moves the people forward. Oscar's play, Oscar's theatre now. Thousands of New Zealanders will be able to see that who didn't really know about the apology, who at the time the Minister said, the Minister of Immigration said he knew the difference between a Jersey and a Frisian cow. That's how he could tell the difference of who was a Niue, who was a Tonga, treating us like animals. I know the difference between a Frisia and a Jersey. No, those are racist remarks, you know, and that's where those are people in government. Also was mentioned about the Dominion Post. The Dominion Post is a Wellington newspaper started by the early immigrants from England who would write news to tell their people back in England what was happening here in Aotearoa. That attitude still exists. The media was never our friend, was always, you know, writing us up as criminals, rapists and murder, all of that, you know, right? The Dominion Post changed their name only after the Black Lives Matter situation. The Dominion Post was called the Dominion because a guy called Seddon wanted an empire in the Pacific, his little kingdom, their Palangi kingdom, and they called it the Dominion, which is where the Dominion Post got its name. Only after Black Lives Matter did they stop the name Dominion. It's now called the Post, I think. But that's the kind of attitude. It's institutionalized racism. Right, so this educate to liberate is what we're doing, and we can do it through art. Teach our children, you know, read the stories. The times are changing, and they can't stop it. We have to keep on going. Art, it's there. People can look at it, and the Black Panthers say art moves the community forward.
Yes,
it's a truth. Just like they educate to liberate. We want education, the true education, our children, true history, you know.
Thanks, Tigilau. Mere, did you want to add, or?
Yeah, I think he's covered it.
Okay. Nina?
It is an interesting, you know, how you gave us these questions, and we did have a little statement about it. And the apology has given space and light for people to feel seen and for Talanoa like today to happen. The danger with the idea of righting historic wrongs is they're described as historic. We're told they're a dark chapter in New Zealand's history. We're told they happened 50 years ago, that they began in 1974 and ended in 1984. Though the dawn rays are displayed as a series of historic events, the reality is it is part of a continuous narrative, the story of colonisation in the Pacific. This story is as present today. Our people lived in a colonised country with its institutions and have lived through intergenerational trauma, and these experiences and the realities of racism and social and economic inequality are in the now. Dawn raids, therefore, must be seen as part of their realities of a systemic process rather than an isolated historic process. In the same way that the story of colonisation must not be pushed into the past, the dawn raids must not be consigned to history. Those that experienced the pain of the dawn raid also endured the daily oppression of a system which restricted their right and movements in a region to which has been indigenous for thousands of years. This is still the case today. An apology runs the risk of seeming to resolve an issue with the past when the reality is much bigger and requires us to face that reality.
Thank you, Liana. I'd like to mihi to our panellists for such a rich sharing today, and really appreciate the time taken and all the mahi that's there. I want to honour your mana, your mahi, and the communities and ancestors you represent. So as we close, I just want to extend my deepest thanks to you all for your stories, reflections, and insights. The conversation today has honoured the resilience of the Pasifika community and the importance of preserving these histories, but as you say, prevent them from continuing. I'd now like to hand over to Reverend Dr. Whailua Inga Taulealea Usumai to share a final reflection.
My stole from St Andrews on this Terrace, where I am the minister. Whaftai lava mo lava noa, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā rangatira mā. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Te whātalo whātu le swafa o Yesu Christo, lo tātou li, lo tātou whaola. I was wondering what I would do in order to try and celebrate these stories that were shared today, stories of pain and hurt. And I think the most appropriate way to sum this up is that I was responsible for the prayer of forgiveness at the apology in 2021. So I thought, as part of the 50 years of commemoration, I will pray that again for our closing prayer. So let us pray. Lea tua pa iai, lea tua o ainga, lea tua o nuu, lea tua o ekalesia, ma lea tua o malo malava. E lea se mea lilo I lau silafanga, a wawo se ato e tatie malai, no mātou poto mai I le nei tu aso. O mātou lu fale mai, o mātou lu fale ma le anganga whawhitai a te oe. O na wole liu le tō whā, ma wa I fo'i le whina ngalo, o se whina ngalo, o le awhionga I le tamaitai pale mia, pa pēr le whainga mālo, o loo taitaina le mātua tunu o le nei vaitau. Se I toi te patasi I tua ma le anganga ma o lalo lava. I nei e toi whaleleia, mea sa whaleangaina, ma se I toi whaasao o mea sa whale tonu, I le vānofo, I le vānofo, ai o tangata I Aotearoa New Zealand, taru ai sawanga I tangata atumotu, e alai le dawn raids. Yesu Christo e whawhitai mo le nei aso. Pulongo I tino matangi le lei, whaamawhanawhananga alawanganga pa ia. Ono le whaamangalo ina o le tele o se se, o pōpua ngā mawhaingata sa awhai nei o tangata I le taimi o le Dawn Raids. Le taimi sa avea ai tangata Polynesia ma le mai le Pasifika ma tangata ese. Sa whalipuipui se ina tangata tō tele. Nā whaapango tia nisi ona o le whailonga lanu. Ma le tau whaleanga ina o tangata mai Polynesia ma le Pasifika. Whaamangalo mai le sese o le malo, ma whainga sa wā sa whaia I nā aso o tōnai. Lingi mai lo alofa tūnoa, ina ia mawhai o na mātou o alofa tasi. Tangata uma le alofa o le tua, I mea uma mātou te whaia I le aso ma le aso. I te tonu o le nei atunu upele o Aotearoa New Zealand. Ia te tū whaatasi tangata uma, mai le tele o atu motu o le Pasifika, ma le laulange atoa. Ina ia mātou fōlinga whaatasi, ma fōlinga o laua fio, wha I mai le file mū, le alofa o le tasi le isi. Ina ia mātou sa vali le file mū ma le fia fia. Ma ia mātou ulima whaatasi lumanai, se I o le whaavau. Gracious God of our Pacific nations, gracious God of our Aotearoa, we come to you in thanksgiving this afternoon as we, as Pacific people, receive the apology from the government of Aotearoa New Zealand for the human rights violations that happened during the Dawn Raids. We are extremely mindful how diversity of race and culture was used as a weapon to divide and rule and to judge during these times. Today we come together to celebrate how our diversity of race and culture is now used to forgive, unite and embrace. We have been humbled by the generosity of spirit that has been shown today in this apology to the tangata whenua and the people of Polynesia and the Pacific for the way they were unjustly and brutally treated and judged by the powers of that time to wrongfully deport, imprison, abuse and mistreat our people. For all that occurred during the Dawn Raids, we are thankful for the humility of today that has brought us to this place of forgiveness and reconciliation. Today we pray that you give us, O God, a vision of the world as your love would make it, a world where the weak are protected and none go hungry or poor, a world where refugees are welcomed warmly into new communities, a world where the benefits of healthcare, shelter and food are shared and everyone can access and enjoy them, a world where different races, nations and cultures live in understanding and mutual respect, a world where peace is built with justice and justice guided by love, a world where the beauty and integrity of creation is honoured and protected, and give us the inspiration and courage to share in the task of building it. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou ariki o ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake, ake, ake. Amine.
Wow, that was absolutely beautiful. I don't know if anyone else is feeling it, but I've got tingles up my spine from that. I just want to say a big thank you, big mihi nui kia koutou to our pōtikanga tawhiti kunaiti and our tikanga rōpū today. Ngā manu ataro, Tumu Whakaere, Chief Executive, Courtney Johnston is here today. Our moderator, Tongilele, Dr. Safua Kailea Mama, and our prolific panel guests. Matua Tigilau Ness, thank you. Whaia, Miri Montgomery, thank you for coming all the way from Otipoti, Dunedin. Oscar Kightley MNZM, amazing, amazing. Beautiful, Nina Nawalowalo ONZM, sharing your stories of your beautiful father and your family here today. And to our special, beautiful, gorgeous and revealing Liana Leiataua, artist of Uatafa Mai Ata that we just revealed yesterday. Thank you so much for coming, Whawhitai Telelava. Thank you to Mas, Vinaka Vakalevu. Thank you for everyone coming and joining this really beautiful corridor. This has been a very special, special day.
Kia ora no tātou katoa. All the acknowledgements have really been done. As the panel was speaking, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just close with these words. And then the panel would cover that off. Okay, don't need to mention that, don't need to mention that. I said, oh, I've got nothing left to mention because it's already been covered by everybody here. I do want to acknowledge the choir rōpū, ngā tama wāhine. Yeah. And I say that because as you were mentioning the name, the waiata, as soon as I heard the waiata, I was like, oh yes. What came to mind was leadership. And all the names that were mentioned in that waiata were critical key leaders. And they were all wahine. How about that? Of course we have male leaders too, but of course wahine have always featured in our cultures actually, and how we complement each other as tāne and as wahine. And so when I heard that song, I thought, well, look at the leadership that's here. I want to acknowledge the whaiwhaiwhao, the minister, tēnā koe for that closing prayer and for reiterating the prayer that was offered at the time of the apology. I think, Nina, you captured it beautifully. And I was sitting with Kira going, I would like to get a copy of that quote, please. Because it talks about a time past, time present. And as I was thinking about how do we close today, Te Papa is very honoured and privileged to be able to host this whole weekend with a series of events, including now. Your presence today has brought honour to what the panel have come to share in their stories. And the question begs, that was 50 years ago, we're here today, where are we going to be in another 50 years' time? What are our aspirations for our children, for our grandchildren, for their grandchildren? We've heard about activism, so then how about this word collectivism? How do we combine our strengths together to ensure that everything is addressed that needs to be addressed, the distress and hurts of the past, to bring us into the present time? What do we need to do today? What is our role in leading out a new future, and what is our part to play in that, to challenge any hurts and injustices or harms that occur, past, present, and then bringing us into Uatafa Maiata, into a new dawn. So I just would like to leave those words with us to contemplate and thank everyone again for your presence here today. Nō reira, tēnei ka mihi atu ki a kōtou katoa. Kia whakakōpitingia ke tēnei huihuinga o tātou i tēnei rangi. Ka whakamihi a rongo hohou i te rongo. Ka whakairingia ke te kete kōrero ki te paitara āwhare. Ko koe tēnā e rongo te manua tīna, rongo te henengaro māhea, rongo te aroaro wātea. Ka whakairi a koe kia wātea, haumi e, hui e, tāi. Mauri ora. I believe we're free to go. We're free to mix and mingle. Ka pai. Kia ora.